click it in the middle and move your cursor up, and you can kind of reveal, basically you're zooming into all these names. Middle mouse click on it to make it bigger, left click on it to scroll it. Okay, we can look at the info while we're operating the gadgets. So if you click here and select things, the select channel comes on, and also the L select channel comes on. If you middle mouse click in here, the M select comes on and the R select comes on. So there's some kind of redundancy here with select and L select, but anyways, you can get middle mouse button select and right mouse button select. So with all these gadgets, you can take a different action based on which mouse button you click. I mean, the whole idea here is you want to build interfaces that are as sophisticated as Flash or whatever. So we've tried to replicate a lot of the features of Flash interfaces, but using chops and panels in Touch Designer. It's different style, much the same function. Didn't mean that. Okay, if you left click here and drag it up, you can see the UV channels. So if you just roll over this slider, you're getting the roll U and roll V. So you don't have to click anywhere there to get these values out. So you can make stuff follow your cursor or do whatever you want to show when you're just rolling over the gadget. And if you actually click on the gadget, you'll get the UV up. The U value is what we're using in this slider. So U and V. So you see also inside this panel chop, I can rename the channel names to be U and V. So I have this crazy rename expression, V square bracket 1-2, which is the same thing as saying V1 space V2. More characters to get. It's just Marcus loves expressions, and I dig it, man. Thank you, Marcus, for making it this way. I do it. That's what I would have done too. No, but in general, sometimes you'll end up with a whole bunch of channels more than two. So that forms better. The way a lot of our panel components work is when there's a chopping output from these things, we just name them V1, V2. That's just a convention that we're using in the base Touch Designer. That's what V1 and V2 are. These things are what we call panel values, as a term used for the channels that are coming out of panels. You also have inside U and inside V. So you also have the rollover flag, which just flips on when you roll over, and there's an inside flag, which is slightly different than the rollover one. And then there's a bunch of them related to radio buttons and double clicking on things. So if you double click on a gadget, click goes to 2, so you can do stuff based on that, and whether the thing's open or not, and what you're doing with the drag wheel on it, and so on. So, and where it is on the screen. So all these useful channels here, but in this case we're only using these two. So you can, I'll just leave that there for now. Yeah, another way of making use of the background image, or getting the background image to do what you're doing, is instead of using the background top field up here, so let's take that out. And background top. Back to gray. We can take this gadget and go inside and give it an input. So double click here, top and in. Okay. And you can connect the input, in this case, connect the input to the input of this slider. Okay, so go back inside. And so it's inside here. Actually, what I want to do here is actually do the effect of the blurring inside here to encapsulate it in a way that I think is portable for this particular use. So the gadget is not just the user interface for it, it's also the effect. So we'll go back out and remember what we did with the blur. I wonder if this will work. Let's give this a shot. Okay, box pick these two. So box pick the blur and the null too. And we're going to copy and paste it inside the slider. So I'm going to do Control C, or right click, copy, either that, Control C, and then go back inside the slider and do Control V here. Okay, so fair enough. We have the input connected to blur, lucky us, and we have the null sitting here by itself. Well, let's just isolate like we did before. I guess we should have pulled the select in. You middle mouse click here. You do the select again, select chop, and we're going to select just the V1 channel and connect that to null, and it's not going to work. Just watch. Oh, it does work. I thought it was going to be named correctly. The channel name is going to be named correctly, but we lucked out. So let's just move these around a little bit so that they're prettier. Just put the controls up here, put the effect down here, and let's just turn off the background display just to make it more tolerable. Okay, so interestingly now we're inside this slider, and we can then move the slider left and right. And why we're not getting an effect? Sorry, what? I didn't make the top visible. Am I blurring this or not?
The range is too small. Just here to one filter size is only the one that.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So I should have copied more stuff over from the parent node. Just put a math shop in between, and let's go super hardcore and just make the range 0 to 100.
On the edge.
On the edge. Blur mania. Wow, look at that. Freak out. Blurred sheep. I never ate that before. Okay, so we have a blur effect inside the component, and still we have, going out from this is the channels, and so we're going to want to send blur out of this thing. When I want to output two different things from a component, I usually put the image out first and then the channels out second. So I'm going to just to simplify things, just delete this out one, and after the blur, put an out there. So it's named out one because the other out one was deleted, which is good. And then now just on the output of panel, just add an out there as well. So under chops, yeah, it's out as well. So now we create two outputs, and they're in the order out one and then out two.
If you were to name the outs, could you see that then in the...
Sometimes it gets screwed up, so this is why I tend to just delete the outs and then just recreate them from scratch.
Okay.
So, but if we do go up one, we can see the two outputs of this component. The image, if you put your mouse over the edge of it, you can see the output as its form, and the chop out, right? Or for amusement's sake.
The ordering is based on the creation.
The ordering is based on the creation order. Yeah.
There's a way to change it. I can't remember where it's at.
Oh.
To reorder.
Yeah. Okay. So
It's on
stick a null out, and for fun, stick a null chop out here as well.
don't
Okay.
get the values when I roll over it. I just see
Oh.
output one chop. I mean, if I stick a null on there, I get the right.
Yeah, so you have to put the cursor a little bit over to the right from the knob, not right close to it, just a little bit over there. Magic region. We need I know we need a little bit of user interface to show that.
Oh, there it is. I clicked the
Okay.
link and then you
You
should
can magically hover your mouse on space.
Just hover, yeah, okay. Sorry about that. We'll fix that. Now that I've gone so far that I don't want to backtrack, please save project.to. And let's go in here and clean things up a bit. Let's clean things up here as well, because this blur is now redundant, so we can take out, we can take a lot of this stuff out. Well, let's just take these things out, these three nodes. Yeah, that one as well. Okay, fine. So this is going reasonably well. So I may want to make this my favorite instead of slider 1. So encapsulated, but we still don't have the image in the background. So because the output is called out1, we can use this as the background. And so under background top here, you type in there ./out1. So this is kind of a Unix speak for dot means me. So me being this component's output, out1 node, it will be the viewer for the background. And is that, okay, so again, is that thing transparent or not? Okay, it's not transparent, okay.
It overrides your color settings.
Right. It overrides the color setting. However, there's a way out. Okay, let's bring up this panel so you can actually see it. Yeah, so you see now the background is opaque. And yeah, the blur effect works just fine. But you can go into the panel tab in the slider component. Has a slider down here called opacity. So you can make it opaque, that gadget opaque based on that's control.
Is there a way to make the dot bigger?
The what?
The knob, or whatever you call it.
The knob bigger?
Or-
Yeah, okay. We'll make the knob bigger right now. So there's like 50 ways to make a interface element. So in this case, it turns out the knob itself is a button component inside the slider. So if you pick the knob and look at it, it's actually it's actually a container. So it's a container gadget within the slider. So the container is just this is just a place to put a gray rectangle. The gray rectangle is defined by the container's background color and background alpha and all that shit, and it has a position. So miraculously, it's a container of size 5 by 5. So we'll make that 10 by 10.
Don't go with the powers.
Okay. And yeah, so it's bigger, fine. And its position is being driven by some expressions, which are grabbing from the panel. So there's three ways of getting panel values, as I showed before. You get it from the panel chop or via expressions. So if we look at the expressions in the X and Y of this knob, the expressions are a huge long, well, it's not that long, less than 5 pages long. It's panel, so here's using a panel expression. So panel of dot dot, which means my parent, which is the slider that it's in, and give me the U value, the U panel value, and you have to scale it a little bit based on the parent's width and height. Now, in this case, we're only using the horizontal value of this thing. So let's make this slider actually just a vertical strip. So you want to make the height the same as the height of the whole gadget. So let's just do this. Pop up one. So we got a slider which is, if you look at the dimensions of the slider we set, click on layout again, and remember we set this slider to be a width of 160 and a height of 90. So we want to make actually the knob 90 high and the same width. So go back in here, and for the knob's parameters for height, just put in 90, and turn the width back to 5. This wide, this thing is 0. Okay. Erase the whole thing? Yes. Okay, 0. Okay, cool. So put a 0 in the Y, and the height is 90. So now we have a slider vertical bar instead of that dot. Okay, so that's kind of cool.
Reference the height from the earlier panel, so if you decided to change your sliders later, then
Yes,
the knob
that's
will
right.
stay the same.
Yes, correct. So really what we should be putting in for the height is we should be grabbing the parent's height, which is actually this part of the expression. It's, yeah, so if we par dot dot slash. So this expression, this par expression grabs a parameter value from somewhere, anywhere in the Touch Designer network. So this grabs the parameter panel W from the parent. So let's figure out why this is called panel W. Let's go up one. Okay, up at the slider level, we're trying to grab this one, W and H. Yeah, right, it's H. Panel height, that's the one we want. So if you roll over a parameter, you'll see its current value and its name. So it's a short lowercase ASCII string, which is the name of the parameter that you would use in an expression or scripting. So anyways, it's called panel H. So that's what we want. So if you want, you can just take a knob. What I do is just copy and paste. Just select that part of that string, par, Control C. You don't have to do this, by the way, and paste it into the height field, and change panel W to panel H. Yeah. Anyway, that's what you want to put down there in height. Par, open bracket, quote, dot dot slash panel H. That would make this thing adjustable if you want to change the height of your gadget. I'll save this out. Oh yeah, a couple other things I wanted to do with this slider. Okay, let's move the slider over a little bit so it's not in the bottom left corner. So go to the slider component and set its Y value and X value to be something, not 0. And for slider 1, why don't we just turn off its display? So to get rid of this guy here for now, let's turn its display flag off. So the parameter for slider 1 under the panel tab, there's a parameter called display. So bring that down to 0. So it's off. So you can drive user interface elements here just by driving with chops, exporting the display on and off, and you can reconfigure things, user interfaces on the fly, by moving them around and setting display and all that stuff. So that's cool. So we have a slider 1 out of the picture now, and so you can see our gadget here. Often there are things that I want to do, like, well, the first thing I want to do with this slider is, you notice when you hit the left side, it locks there, but also locks when I hit the right side. And I want to actually have it go past 100 blur when I go out here. So that's done by the slider tab. The slider tab for the slider component has a couple of things here that are just specific to sliders. So down here you have these clamping checkboxes. Well, first of all, this says this is a slider type UV. I actually don't care about the V, which is the vertical. I just don't care about the horizontal. So you can change the slider type just to be anal about it. So the slider type to be U only. It doesn't have any net effect, but it's just like that. And the other thing is you can clamp the U low value, but you can unclamp the high value, so you can actually go beyond the top limit. So uncheck the clamp U high, and you can then drag your slider slider off here into nether space. So that's interesting because I'm now, doesn't look too cool, but it's out there. There's a couple of ways of dealing with that. Of course. It's called crop. There's this crop panel here. There's a crop panel. You can turn cropping off under the layout. You can turn that. So when you go off, it doesn't. You don't see it. Or you can clamp it in the chops inside. But does that make sense? Sometimes when I'm performing things live, I like to. I'm kind of lazy, and especially if you're using touchscreen, I'm very sloppy with the controls, and getting a slider back to 0 is not so easy because you have to bring it above 0 and drag it down to 0. So we have this dead zones in the slider control as well, and that's what this thing under slider. You have zone left and zone right. This, okay, we have to do some internal adjustments for this, but you can bring zone up to like 10% and zone right, well, just up to 10%. So if you're in the bottom 10% of this thing, it'll be 0. The output will be 0. As you can see, the output here is 0, even though my cursor is a little bit above 0. I'd have to do it, actually, you adjust inside here, the math shop, so it's, yeah, there's a little bit of
Enjoy response.
yeah. Okay, so we're going to look at one other thing here called cloning. And, okay, I don't like the slider one anymore, so delete it. And then we can just take slider 1 and go blur. Blur 1. Okay. And let's say I had 2 inputs. So if we had this thing set up with a 2, if pick these 2, video player and null, and copy and paste them, so you end up with video player 1. Oh, actually that's an interesting thing. Yeah, we should have just called this video player. So rename this one to be video player 2 and make this one video player 1. So let's make another input for effect, for blur. Let's do, let's try this. Yeah, let's just, yeah, okay, just box pick these things and copy paste that as well. Copy, Control C, Control V. So we have 2 blurs, 2 blur effects, and we want to have another input as well. So double click here, top, in. So here's our second input. Connect that to the input of blur 2. And you can go out and connect the second input to it. Okay, they're sitting on this in the same place. And there's a couple of ways of, well, let's just go inside and move them manually. There's a bunch of ways of kind of procedurally moving, placing things. Under layout for both of them, so box pick both of these blurs, and for the Y position, they're both at 33, and actually if you look at this result here, if you move the Y slider, they're both moving together. Well, you move it and they pop together, so basically it moves one, pop together. So both essentially they both have the same value. I want the value to be, the vertical value to be the based on the name of the gadget. Okay, so this one's called blur 1. This one's called blur 2. So I want to use this number 1 and 2 to set positions differently. So if you box pick both of them, and you go to layout, and you type in for the Y position, put in 100 times star $OD. Okay.
Zero or?
What's that?
Stands for operator digit.
Yeah, $OD. So capital O, capital D.
Okay.
So yeah, stands for operator digits. So it's yet another kind of variable that's local to the node, and you can get the $ON and $OPD. You can get the parent's digits. So it's a way of getting every almost identical component to have different properties. So what this worked out to be was it took the number 1 and multiplied by 100 and put it at 100, and then this number 2 put it at 200. So yes, there's space down here, and you may want to do top to bottom and do minus and da 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 da. So you can put any expression up here to position these things, let's say vertically in this case. So now we have two gadgets that are blurring independently. Let's go, okay, so fine. Let's send, so we have an output here, and let's make the output of the null connect to an out top, so this component has two outs. That's good. So I'm going to explain one thing quickly about cloning. So these things, we want them to be defined to be the same thing. If I go inside blur 1 and I change something, it will not affect blur 2. So I want to make blur 2 always the same as blur 1. So this introduces the idea of cloning. So if you pick both of them and you go into the last tab of the parameters, there's the common tab. There's a field here called clone. So clone makes components identical on the inside. So what I usually do, and Steve doesn't agree with this, but and there's reasons for both. There's always the idea of the master clone. So when you put in here a name, it means which component is the master. So I go in here and I just type in blur 1, and that means that blur 1 is the master, and so this means blur 1's a master of its own self, but the master of blur 2 is blur 1. So that means when I go inside blur 2 and I make a change, it also affects here. So
Hold on, point out that it's now darker.
okay, so whenever you see a dark node like this, it means it's a clone of something. So you go to the clone page, see where it comes from. Oh yeah, okay, got it. Okay, so if you go inside the blur 2, there's a node up here that says clone. So it means I'm inside a clone, and all the nodes in here are darker to help me be aware that I'm actually in a clone. That you can monkey around in here, but if you change things, it won't save it permanently. So I want to add something like a flip. I'll flip this image upside down inside blur 1. So let's go inside blur 1 and add in a flip. So do a flip upside down, flip Y, let's say. Okay, well, great subject matter. So that's upside down, but if we go inside this blur 2, we see there's the flip 1. You can make a master and other things just get replicated as you're working. So if you make changes in a clone, you better make sure that you copy them back into the master before you're finished, otherwise they'll get wiped out. Or just work in the master all the time. Yes?
When you say let's say you say the effect, export it.
Yes.
The effect container as something you can drop in
Somewhere else, yes?
Can you open it, and when you save it, it appears in project trees?
We wanted to talk today about TOX files. You can save a component out as a TOX file, a component file. It's only after you save it out and then start another application up that it will get it pulled in. But it won't do it automatically. You have to close the destination application and start it again, or load it again by hand.
Yeah. You can see there's a parameter field there that says external.tox. That's a place where you can specify a TOX file. And you can show it right now, Greg. I mean, to save out your component, you just right-click on a component.
Yeah.
And there's an option that says save.
Save component. Yeah.
And if you click that, that's going to allow you to type in a file name and a TOX file.
Yeah.
So you
Word.2.
can completely componentize and create very, very modular networks. This is also really useful for, we use this a lot in production. When you have a really complicated show, you might have a network for a piece of music that's huge. It's got lots of textures, lots of geometry. It's really complicated. You're pushing your computer system to the limit. So we might save that out as a TOX file. And then what you can do is each song will live as a different TOX file on your hard drive, so that when you want to switch songs, you don't have to like close Touch Designer and then reopen another file. You just tell a kind of a holder, a placeholder container to load a different TOX file, and it will do that on the fly. And so it saves GPU RAM and all that sort of stuff.
Loading the TOX files.
There's a way to do it with scripting, and there's a button you can press in the parameters panel if you want to just reload the TOX file. So there's a couple different ways of making that happen.
Probably make the files objects and they can make earlier feature
Yeah,
interface.
you can totally do that. Yeah. But like, I've got a whole directory of TOX files that are just different effects and post-processing effects and things. And you can literally, from Windows Explorer, like drag and drop them into your network and they just show up.
Okay, so we're almost at the end of what I want to show. So that's kind of the basics of cloning. We now have two outputs in this effects component, out 1 and out 2. And I just wanted to tie in this in with some pre-made stuff. So let's just put a null here as well, just for amusement's sake. Not necessary. Okay, and let's say I want to combine these two in a different way than a crossfade. So I'll just pull one component out from our palette. There's this anchor up here, this thing we closed at the beginning, the palette. This brings up the browser for the palette, and there's a couple of pre-made things here. There's one component called blend, so just click it and drag it onto the network, and just move it. Whoops! Just pick it and move it on the right side of this. It takes two inputs, and you can click here and connect the two inputs to that, and it's a different set of it's sort of like a crossfader with a selection of what kind of crossfade you want. So when you're on the left, you have it's input 1. When it's on the right, it's input 2. In the middle, it's some effect on them. So this component has a bunch of options that are, I guess, useful for doing live stuff. First of all, if you turn on its viewer active, you can click on the word at the bottom. Before we do that, let me grab the output and put a null on the output. See what the result is. Okay. When you click here, it brings up this little menu. You can embed this menu into something else if you want, but it essentially lets you kind of preview a mixing effect. You pick it when you click on it, actually enacts the effect. It actually selects it, but you can preview what the effect will be before you click on anything. And also, you can swap the. So when you go, input 1, input 2, and the mix between. So you can also switch between inputs. So the 1 and 2 get swapped here, and that's represented by these left side and right side of these gadgets. This is a swapped input or non-swapped input here. So, was it this one?
Yes.
It is by clicking on the bottom of the down here of the. So off. just click down here and it'll bring up the. Did you get that? So it's just it's just an example of a blender that's practical. So you can have a bunch of them combining various sources.
Since since this is a pre-made component, it's also interesting to just go inside and
Scare
see how
everybody
it's done.
off.
Like it's not a
There it is.
black box. It's actually like you can.
Yeah, here's your inputs and defaults and switching here between A and B, and then the effects come in. Actually, a lot of these effects are Photoshop shaders. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Let's just pull this thing up and go inside. They're actually GLSL shaders, and here's the effect that I'm currently using. It's a soft light shader, but if I select a different effect like this one, the shader changes to darken. And so this is the GLSL code here. So these are just different shaders, so you can add your own kind of thing. So that's the pixel shader, and this is the vertex shader, which is just a rectangle. So some of the effects are GLSL, some of them are using the comp top, and some of them are using some other kind of effects things that we hooked up in some other components. So here's another example of a pre-made component, and I think that's all I wanted to show. I was just going to lay it out nice and tidy here, where the this main component had all the gadgets laid out nicely. If you hit F1, you can go to perform mode and perform all this stuff with the control panels that you've designed. Things are not visible here, partly because it's effect off and
The geometry containers.
the geometry one is a container, right? So that's including everything, right? Oh, right.
GF display.
Yeah, so panel display that one up. That's right. Okay, so maybe that one will. Hang on.
And your video player.
Video player is these ones, right? So that one should go off. Those should go off now. So let's just pretty this up. We can do it right now. Bring up this control panel. Get rid of the palette. Move the blend over a little bit by X. Whoops. Hang on. Yeah. X, Y. Okay, fine. And then we want to stick the background of this null. We'll call it out. We'll send it to out anyway. This. And that's the background of the thing. So that's my application that I just made. Save it out and go into F1. And so here we go. So
It's not too super difficult. It's actually like if you've got multiple monitors hooked up to your computer, you can just make your main project like really big, like 30 whatever, size of 2 screens, and you can just position your elements.
Coordinates.
Yeah, it's just coordinates. There's a couple ways to accomplish it, but
Okay.
that's what's the
Yeah, because you
simplest
side by side monitors, just make a big project. And then all your
Okay. So when you do, okay.
Or you can make multiple windows.
for production. For stability in production environments, usually or installations, I usually don't do user interface stuff on machines that are actually generating graphics. I know that everybody has the luxury of having like lots of computers, but it's definitely more efficient and more stable to have all your user interface stuff happening on one computer, and then you can use the networking operators to deliver information about what you're doing to any number of other computers.
what I did here was I've put down a window component. So the perform window, which is what you see when you go into F1, that's a window component, which is here. I made another window component here, which is, if I just turn it on by hand, it's a borderless thing, which is the output of the effects. If I go into perform mode now, pretend this is the user interface on your monitor 1, and then this is a window that comes up, so we put it onto monitor 2 or 3 or 4. You'd have one window which is triple width wide. Make it more optimized by putting the user interface plus your 3 all in one window, and just display one window. And that's the absolute most efficient way.
It just does one big out.
Yeah.
basically. Okay.
Yeah.